Hey, Rafit from CurlyBrackets here. In this video, I'm going to show you how CSS works. Now, you might have already worked with HTML before, which is what gives structure and content to websites. But how do you go from quite boring looking websites in HTML, just white background, black text, to something like this, where I have a nice pink background, some red text, and black text over here, and it's a line in the center? Well, that's where CSS comes in. CSS is what takes your HTML and you can style it exactly the way you want using that. So in this video, we're going to look at that. Okay, let's get started. So you want to go ahead and make a new REPL and choose the HTML, CSS, JavaScript template, give it a name, and then create REPL. I've already gone ahead and done that. And in order to make it easy for you to follow along, I'm going to be coding here and then previewing the website here in a new tab. And we're going to be working first in this index.html file. So with that out of the way, let's get started. Let me just zoom in a little bit more so it's easier for you to see. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so we've already looked at some HTML. Hopefully you know a little bit about HTML before you're watching this video. But in case you forgot, HTML takes care of the structure and content of a website. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at an example. So I'm inside of the body tag, and I want to have a nice heading up here that says hello world, let's say. How do I do that? Well, I do that using HTML. And as you probably remember, HTML is all just a bunch of tags that you use to get different things. So let's use the H1 tag. So H1, that's going to be the structure part. And then the content part is hello world, whatever text I choose to put in there, and then close it with an H1 tag like that. Just remember that the closing tags are supposed to have this slash symbol. So once I have that, and it takes us a second or two to save here on REPL, and I go here and I refresh, I get hello world. So right now it's all HTML. Right now it's all HTML. Now what HTML does is that it gives you a bunch of default values. For example, a default value of this hello world text is that it's a certain size, in pixels. And you can't really do much there. You can't really change that, right? If you're just using HTML. Now another default value is that it's black text. It's always black text, right? In the only case where it's not black is when it's a link, in which case it's blue text. So those are all default values. Now what if you want to change those values? What if you want this text to not be black but be red? Well, that's where CSS comes in. CSS takes care of all the styling that you might want to do on your website. And it actually stands for cascading style sheets. So let's look at how we can change this text from black to, let's say, red. So I'm going to go here. As we're going to see in this video, there are several different ways of doing this, of writing your CSS, or where rather you want to write it. And I'm going to show you all those three main ways, and I'll show you what are the benefits and downsides of each. So the easiest way, and the way that most people learn this the very first time, is to do it right here in the tag. So let's go into the H1 tag and press space. And then you might remember that whenever we want to change something here, we write like something like we have here, src equals, and then quotation marks. That's kind of the general way that you write things inside of HTML tags. And so there is a special attribute here that you can use, which is style, which means that you'll be writing CSS inline inside of this H1 tag. So do that, and then equals, and then quotation marks like this. And then in here we can write CSS. So let's try this. Let's write color and then colon red, and then see what that does. Refresh. And that turns it into red, which is exactly what I would expect. Let's take a look at this code a little bit here. So CSS, similar to HTML, is actually quite simple to do. you've got a bunch of different things that you can do, one of them being changing the color of some text to something else. And what you do is that you just get to that thing that you want to change, and you state what you want to change, write colon, and then you state exactly how you want to change it, what you want to change it to. So there's this kind of this property of this thing that you want to change that you access, like I want to change the color of this thing, and then you state which color. It's really all it is. Now, the more difficult part is really getting to exactly, whatever you want to change, finding out what it actually is. Because let me give you an example here. Let's say that you wanted to change, color, right? I'll write this, right? So is that how you write it? Let me just check on Google. There we go. Okay, so I just wanted to check the other spelling for color. So this would be the British spelling for color. Will this work? Let's check. This is not going to work. So this thing is only going to work if you put color here, written exactly this way. So that really is the more tough part. But as soon as you get pretty good at using Google to search these things up, it's pretty simple. You just got to write what you want and then write CSS, and then you'll probably get some very good websites out there that will show you exactly how to use it. Okay, so anyway, we can choose some other values here. So let's try blue. We got blue, and let's try one more, pink. Pink will also work. Now, what do you do if you want a very specific color that's not exactly blue, but it's somewhere between blue and red? Well, then you can use different ways of representing colors. I'm not really going to get too much into it right now, but one way that you might have seen done this is using these hex codes. And so if you wanted to say black in this, rather than write black here, you could, for example, do 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. That's going to give you black. So there are different ways here that you can represent color. There's also RGB, if you've heard about that. What you can do here then is just do RGB and then give the amount of red you want, green, and blue. Let's see if that works with the red. That also works. So just wanted to make a note there. Several different ways you can do this. So let me actually change this back to red. Okay, let me give you one more example. What if I wanted to make this text larger or smaller? Well, I can do that by writing another instruction here. Now, if I just do it like this, if I press space and I write something else, it's not going to work. When you're done with one statement, you have to tell the browser that or HTML, CSS, that you're done with this statement, and you do that by writing semicolon here. So now it knows, okay, we're done with this, going on to something new. Let's use font size. Then here we can say let's make it really tiny, 5 pixels, 5 px, like that. And then refresh, you see that it becomes really, really small. Let's make it really large, 150 pixels. There we go, much, very, very big. So that's how you do those two things. So let me scroll down a little bit here. And then I'm not really using this. This is kind of referring to some JavaScript that we can use. We haven't really gotten to JavaScript yet. I'm not really interested in it. So I'm just going to remove this for now. I don't really need it. Okay, so now let me try some text. Let me make a paragraph tag and write, this is a sentence, like this. Make sure that pops up. There we go, comes up there. Now, let me show you how I could put this in the center right here. So we've seen before that we can use this HTML tag called center and then just put it around, whatever you want to center. Now, that kind of works if you have a really simple website with just a couple of things. You you can use that, no problem, but it gets a little bit messy. And it's not really the best way to do this thing. So let me show you the CSS way of doing it. Get rid of this, and then again, I'm going to just use style. This part is the same with everything. So I have that, and then I want to write text align, like this, center. Now, if I go here now and refresh, this is now aligned in the center. Now, what if I wanted to align it the right side? Well, I can just press right, or right, and then it's the right side, and then of course the default one is left, like this. So this you definitely wouldn't be able to do with HTML if you wanted to center it, or if you wanted to align it right. There's no tag for that. But CSS gives you that functionality. So let's take a look at the code a little bit before we go further. Now this works. This definitely works. There's nothing wrong with it in that way. But I don't know about you, but it doesn't really look all that great to me. It looks a little bit messy. It looks a bit kind of convoluted. And so it does look a bit messy. And the reason for that is because we have HTML here, but then there's some CSS here. So we're kind of combining two things in the same way, or in the same line of code. And the other thing is that we don't really need to worry about this right now, but when you're working on these kinds of things in teams of 2 or 3 or more people, then you might not be the person responsible for the styling of the page. You might only be responsible for the HTML. But the way it's done right now, it makes it a little bit hard for you to collaborate with another designer or something like that, or a front-end developer who does CSS, because it's all in the same line of code. So we definitely want to separate this. So we want to separate the HTML from the CSS. So let's look at how we can do that. So I'm going to tell you, there are 2 different ways of doing it. I'm going to just give you the first way that you can do by using the same document. So here's how you do it with the HTML document. So you go up inside of the head tag here. And here you want to get a new line and then write a style tag like this. And then you just write whatever thing in here. But there's a little problem here, because in here, when we do it like this, we know exactly what we want to apply this thing to. We want to apply it to whatever tag that you've written it in. But how do we do it here? Because we need to first identify what type of tag we want to apply this thing to. Turns out that CSS provides a really easy way to do that. So let's look at how we can identify this tag. So we are going to look at some other ways of identifying it, but for now, I can definitely identify it by the H1. So we only have one H1 tag, so only one of those, and we can say in here that I want to apply this style to all H1 tags. Let's try that now. So let's go up here and write H1. And then whatever things I want to be applied to the H1 tag, I have to put inside of curly brackets. So I'm going to write curly brackets here and then press enter. And then I'm just going to start lining up all of these instructions one by one. So I already kind of have those things that I want to apply right here. So why don't I just copy these like this, copy, and then paste. And then I want to make it nice. I want to put each thing on its separate line. So I'm just enter here and then go here, press, make a semicolon there. And once I've done that, I no longer need to do it here. So let me actually get only rid of this because I want to show you something. Like so. Okay, so let's take a look now what we get. Now, if this works, nothing should change because it should remain the same because we just copied and pasted. Definitely, it's this didn't change. So let's make this a little bit smaller, or quite a bit smaller, 50 pixels. Refresh. There we go. So now you see that you can use this part, which is kind of completely separate from this part right here. Now, what happens though, because now we have two ways of applying styles. You might be thinking to yourself, what if I put something here? Let's say that I put in color here, and then I put blue here. What is it that is going to be prioritized? Is it going to be red or is it going to be blue? Well, let's take a look. Maybe you want to guess what it's going to be. Let's take a look what it is. It is blue. So it turns out that whatever you write here is going to be overridden if there's a clash. So in this case, there is a clash because there's like two colors being defined here. So it's always this part that is going to be overridden by whatever is here. So yes, kind of just a rule that you have to remember. Now let me get rid of this. And let me also make another one of these. P for the paragraph tag. And I'm going to scroll down here and then copy this and get rid of this and then put it here. Oops. You always want to remember the semicolons at the end. Let's take a look now, and definitely works. Okay, so this is the second way of doing it. Now let's dive a little bit deeper here and explore some things. So we have a way of writing H1 here to target this H1, but there is a problem, because what happens if you have several H1s? Let's say that you copy this and you have 3 of these. What happens then? Well, if we refresh now, we're going to get 3 H1s with the exact same styling. Now this makes sense because what we've done up here is just said H1. Now it's going to go through and apply this to every single H1 that we have, which is exactly what we've told it to do. But what I want to do is that I want to have a certain color here, I want to have another color here, I want to have a completely different color here. How do we do that? Well, this is where we come to classes. So if I want to say that this H1 should have a very specific style, I can make a class for that. So 2 things there. First, what you want to do is go inside of here and then press space and then write class equals quotation mark, and then just come up with a name of a class. Now this is something that you pick yourself. Could be whatever you pick. Let's make this the title. So I'm going to write title. It's, even though you can pick whatever names for classes, it still makes sense to do a little bit of thinking and come up with something that seems logical and is a good name for this. So in my case, title I think is good because it's kind of the title of the website. So I'm going to give it that name. Now once you've given it that name, you can access it up here by doing the following. Because this is a class, we want to put a dot first. This CSS knows, okay, now we're talking about classes. And then you want to write the name of the class, which is title. So let's write title. And then again, curly brackets, this part is the same for everything. And then now we can tell it, what type of color we want. So let me write color, and then I'll say orange. All right, let's see what happens now. So now this part is orange. Only the first one is orange, because H1 is having these styles. So that's why these two have that red. But because class comes after whatever you've defined for H1, then it kind of has a higher priority. And so then we've said, well, we have a CSS class called title, and it has the color orange. So that's why it comes up to orange. So now you can basically make classes, and whether you're using the same tag, like you were using several H1s or P tags or div tags or whatever, you can use classes to give it specific areas of your code or areas of your content, different type of styling. Now there's one more thing here. So classes, you can have several H1s here having the same class. So what you do is just make a class, and then you apply it to a bunch of things, however many times you want. All right, so far we've looked at two different ways of using CSS. One was, of course, just writing style here, or you can separate it up here. Now there's a third way too. You might have noticed that on the files that are generated when you start with a CSS, HTML, and JS template, you get a CSS file here too, style.css. This is the third way of doing it, to completely separate it out into a completely different file. Now, we actually already have the code needed to bring in all of that styles from the CSS file into our main page. This one right here, this line of code, actually is saying that whatever styles you have in CSS, style.css, just apply it here. So let's copy what we have so far from here. Copy, and then I'm going to remove this. And then I'm going to say put it in style.css, which should be empty when you start with this thing. Just put it here. Of course, I want to get those lined up properly. There we go. So this is even better. This is the third way, and this is even better. If you could just put it into a separate file altogether, that's the best way of doing it. So let's see here. Let's just make sure that it's working by running this thing. Yes, it is. There we go. Okay, so let me just, we've been doing some testing so far, some exploration. Let me get rid of what I'm not using here. And let's look at some more things in CSS. All right, so I'm gonna get rid of this H1 because I already have the class title. So of course we have the color. Let me change this to red. And then let's do font size. And then font size, I'm gonna say it's 40 pixels. And then we have alignment. We can certainly align it in the middle. And then we have font family also, which you might want to do, where you want to change the font type that you're using. Now here, REPL is even suggesting to me a lot of stuff that I can use. There are a lot of different options here. Let's go with one of these. Let me do Lucinda Sans. And actually, let me get rid of all of this because I don't need that for now. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Okay, so now we have a different font. Let's try this now. That doesn't even work. It's the same font that I have before. Now this is a good thing that we ran into. Well, you could have a bunch of different fonts that you could use here, but the problem is that if you use a different font, you got to make sure that it's the person that is viewing the website actually has that font installed on their computer, otherwise it's not going to work. So in my case, Lucinda Sans is not something that I have installed, which means that it's just giving me the default font already. So we could try another here. Let's try Arial. That should definitely work. There we go. So that changed it. And most people have Arial on their computers, but much not be the case. So there's definitely a different, much better way of doing it, which is called using something called Google Fonts, where Google has a lot of fonts on their server saved that you can use, and because basically everyone has access to Google, you know that the person is gonna get the right font displayed on the website. Just a little bit about fonts. We'll make another video explaining exactly on how to use Google Fonts. Okay, so that's for this this text for the main thing. I think that looks good. I want to definitely center this. There we go. And then I'll do the very last thing, because this is really all there is to CSS. CSS is just a bunch of these things that you can get to. You can search for it online, and then you just apply it, whatever you want. So there's not really much more to that. But I want to show you one more thing, which is if you want to target something like the body, you want to make the background a different color, let's say, or want to use an image or something like that. How do you do that? So it's really just about, again, targeting the right tag. And so let's take a look here on the HTML index page. We got the body tag. So this is basically the whole website that we see. So if we targeted this body, we would be able to change the color of the background. So because, again, it's an inbuilt HTML thing, a tag, we can just write body for that without, writing anything before that, like this. And then we can say background color. Then we can change it to, let's try to change it to pink. There we go. Change that. Now, I'll show you one more thing, which is how do you get a background image? Well, then you got to say URL, and then inside here, you want to put quotation marks and then give it the location of an image. So if you have saved an image and you want to upload it to your REPL here, you could do that, and you can just refer to that. But because I don't have that, I'm gonna make it a bit easier, and I'm gonna go to Google and find a nice background image. So let's say background image. Let's see. Let me go for something like this. So I want to copy image address, and then I just want to put it in here. Should end in something like JPEG. Definitely does. And refresh. And there you go. So it doesn't look that great because it's a fairly small image that gets repeated. We can change all of that. But that's all I wanted to show you in this beginner tutorial for CSS. It's what makes it possible so that you can style your websites. And it's really a very, very large subject. There's a lot of different things that you can learn, but it really only has to do with all the different kind of statements or instructions you can give it to make different things happen. The kind of very basis of CSS is quite simple. You're just targeting different tags in HTML. You're making these curly brackets, and inside of it, you're telling it exactly how you want to style it. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to watch more tutorials like this, head on over to CurlyBrackets.no to find more. You can learn about how websites work. We also have some tutorials on game development and a lot of other things. So I'll see you in the next video.